Yeah, all right, fantastic. Somebody asked about the material that I'm sharing today. If you would like a copy of anything that I've shared today, you can shoot me an email. Let me give you my email address. It's Scot, SCOT, LOYD, 1 at gmail.com. So Scot Loyd 1 at gmail.com. Remember, it's 1 T and 1 L. Thus, SCOT LOYD 1 at gmail.com. So, fantastic time that I have with you today. I really am thankful to Colonel Mark Turner for the invitation. I appreciate all of you and the leadership of this group having me come today. Hope it is beneficial to you. And if there's just one thing that you can take away and apply to your leadership and to what you're doing, I think it will be beneficial. As we mentioned earlier, we are living at a time when we have all kinds of people interacting together in the workplace. This is unique in American history. And so if we think about communication, right, and communicating for a change, I'm reminded of the quote that says, the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And you have probably experienced that in your organization. You've probably experienced that in your personal life, right? You ever been riding down the highway with your significant other and you get that dreaded question, where do you see this relationship going? Right now we're going to the house. That's where I think we're going. But it's like, that's not what that means, right? There's a connotative, right? What has to do with the feelings and the emotions that are attached to words versus the denotative or the dictionary definition of words. And because of the uniqueness of the English language, we can use the same words and be communicating two tremendously different things. And so communication, one of the axioms of communication is that it is complicated. And so if we're going to communicate with all the people that are around us, right, the first thing we've got to realize is that all of us are weird. I'm really disappointed this show doesn't come on TV anymore. I was a big fan. The fact of the matter is that all of us are weird. All of us are strange. All of us are different. You remember when you were a kid and you were invited to stay over at a friend's house for the first time, and you go over there and you're allowed to sit down in front of the television as you eat dinner, and you're like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. At my house, I only get sweet tea, but I get Kool-Aid. That's awesome, right? And so you compare your experience at that new place with your experience at home, and you realize that not everybody is like you. And then you put your family on a spectrum, and your family is either cool or not cool, dependent on how they relate to that other family and that experience that you had here. So what you need to understand is that all of us are different. All of us have a different story to tell. All of us have a different worldview. All of us have a different experience. All of us have a different story. And it may be weird to you, but you have something to learn from those that are around you. So open up your ears and listen to what those that are around you, what they are saying. Because the first time, as we mentioned earlier, in American history, we have all of these generations working together. And what we like to do is we like to put people in categories. And we like to assume things about others that we meet based upon their age, based upon how we perceive their education level to be, their socioeconomic status, whatever's going on, right? And every generation that comes after another generation is just screwed, right? We're like, they're not going to make it. They're in trouble, right? I don't know what they're going to do. This new generation, these youngins, I don't know, right? But they're thinking the same thing about you. And so what you got to do is you got to take a step back and say, look, we're all the same. We're all the same in that we are all different and we are all weird. And so let's learn to get along and see what we can learn from others that are around us. Because people are people no matter what their age, no matter what their socioeconomic status, no matter what their experiences, and we need to give them the right to live those experiences, and they have a right to their experience, But we need to understand that just because their experience is not ours doesn't mean that they're better or worse than we are. They're just different, and different is okay. And how does that impact communication? Because that's something we all have in common, right? We all have this idea that I've got to communicate to those that are around me. I've got to say something to them. And just because I say it doesn't necessarily mean that is what they hear. And if you've ever had words that have left your mouth, and when they are leaving your mouth and that other person's expression is changing, and you realize, ooh, I have said the wrong thing. And it's like, can I pull those words back in? But the thing about communication, right, is that it is irreversible. Once it's said, it's out there. And you may not have meant it as it is being heard, but what is said is not always what is heard. And so regardless of your circumstance, your background, your worldview, your ethnicity, all of us have problems with communication. But here's the great thing about communication skills. They can be improved. And communication is a sport sort of like football. You get better at it with reps, right? Why do you practice? So you can get better at it. Why do you play the practice games and the scrimmages? So you can get better at it. The more you practice communication, the better you will get at communicating. But what happens is that we're like, I don't want to say that. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to open my mouth because I had a bad experience, right? In third grade, I gave a book report and I got really embarrassed and some folks laughed at me. So I don't think I can do that. Hey, let me tell you something. All of us are afraid of communicating, especially in front of groups of people. In fact, it's the number one fear in America, public speaking. It beats out death. It does. More people are afraid of speaking in public than they are of dying, right? And, to echo Jerry Seinfeld, which means, basically at the funeral, you'd rather be the person standing behind in the box than standing behind the podium, right? It's that bad. We are afraid of public speaking. And it doesn't get better. I wish I could tell you, I've been speaking for years to diverse audiences around the world. It doesn't get better. Believe it or not, I'm nervous standing up here. The point is that it never goes away. The best you can do is learn to manage that communication apprehension. I had a kid one time in basic public speaking class, and he was standing up there endeavoring to give his speech, and he was like Ricky Bobby in Talladega Nights. I don't know what to do with my hands. And literally, his hands were up here the entire time he was giving his speech. And he sat down. I said, that was really nice. Can I ask you a question? Why were your hands like this the entire time you were speaking? He said, my hands weren't like that. And I said, oh, yes, they were. And the entire audience agreed. They were. He was so nervous, he wasn't even aware that his hands were like that. He was ready to fight, take on somebody. And then I had another kid, right, stuck his hands in his pockets, but he continued to do the gestures as he spoke, right? So his pockets were doing weird things like this as he was giving. And it was like, it became really awkward, and I'm not sure what's going on down there, my friend, but this is not appropriate. And so all of us can improve our communication skills. And no matter where you find yourself at, the good news is that you can become a better communicator. So I don't know if you can see all of this, but this is a basic model of communication. It's known as the transactional model of communication. So you have two people that are speaking to each other face to face. You have the communicator, right, on one side, and a communicator on the other side, and both of them are communicating. One of them is using words, encoding words, and employing certain words to communicate a message across a channel, right? And that message across the channel is traveling in encoded words and nonverbals, and then the other person is decoding what is heard and what is received, and then there is a feedback loop, right? And in all of this, we're competing with noise. Noise that is both internal and external. So if I pause speaking for just a moment, you hear certain external noises, the hum of the projector, someone coughing, maybe someone tapping a pencil. But really, as a speaker and as a communicator, that's not my main competition. My main competition is the internal noise. All of those conversations that all of you are having right now in your head as I am speaking. You're thinking about, wow, I've got lots of things to do this weekend. I wonder who's playing tonight, right? I want to get home and relax and chill out for a while. And all of these conversations, and I'm competing with that as a speaker. Guess what? So are you. Every time you have a conversation with someone, every time you are endeavoring to communicate with those that are around you, you are competing with that noise that is external and internal. Further, it is complicated by the fact that you're encoding one word and they're decoding another word, right? And so that's happening all of the time. It is taking place in our communication transactions. So communication is complicated, but you can get better at it. And one way to do that is to endeavor to understand cultural references. So, if I put this up, I had a really sad experience in one of my freshman level communication courses. I put up this meme, right? And I'm like, hey everybody, who is this? And those freshmen looked at me like they had no idea. And one guy in the back said, that's Batman. And I wept openly in front of the class. These cultural references become more difficult, right, the older you get, because there is less and less people that are familiar with huge cultural references. But if you want to improve as a communicator, you need to be aware with what's going on in the world. It doesn't mean that you have to know all of the details, but at least have some idea of where the people that you're interacting with are living and what they're experiencing. What are they listening to? Who is influencing them as far as entertainers and politicians, and what's happening in the cultural landscape? Now, I understand I'm getting older and it becomes more difficult with every passing year. And then also you have the fact that our entertainment choices are so varied. When I was growing up, I had three. We lived in the country in northeast Arkansas. We had 3 channels, 4 if the wind was blowing right, 5 if I stood out there and held the antenna as my dad yelled at me through the window, right? Turn it to the left, no, to the right, right there, stay right there. And he watched his entire program and I stood outside in the cold. So entertainment choices have changed. So it's a lot more difficult now to keep up. But if you want to be an effective leader and an effective communicator, know what's happening in the world of the people that you're leading and that you're interacting with. And more than that, know what's happening in their lives. Do you know the struggles that they're facing personally? Are they opening up to you? And if you want people to open up to you, then you need to open up to them. You need to be vulnerable to them. Share your struggles. Share your vulnerabilities. We have this misconception in our society that if we want to be a strong leader, then nobody can ever see us sweat, nobody can ever see us cry, nobody can ever see us struggle. But with this emerging generation in particular, it is very, very different. If you want to earn the right to lead them, and make no mistake, no matter what organization you're in, you are leading by permission. You might have a title and they might have to listen to you from time to time, but if you really want to be an effective leader in their lives, then you have to earn the right. They have to give you permission to lead them. So know what's going on in their lives, and part of earning that right is being vulnerable with them and saying, look, I'm struggling in this area. I made a mistake. We need to fix it. We need to correct it. I need to correct it. I'll do better. Let me learn. Let me grow. Let's all grow and learn together. Keep your hands open to receive from others, right? I coach competitive debate, and debate is sort of like football in that you can hit people verbally, but you have to do so within the rules, right? And so one of the things that I coach my debaters, because novice debaters, when you get into a room, pretty much all of us kind of grow up in situations where we sit around the table. Unless you come from a strange family, everybody kind of agrees with the patriarch or the matriarch, and it kind of, we all think of the same things. We go to a church where everybody agrees on the same doctrine, and if there's a church fight, somebody leaves and somebody's disgruntled. But pretty much we live and we dwell and we work in communities where everybody agrees with us. Well, the thing about debate is you step onto a stage and you've got to persuade a judge that's in the room that your position is correct, but then you've got to have somebody stand beside you and say, no, you're wrong, and here's why. And most of us are not used to that type of conflict. And so the novice debater, they get bent out of shape and they want to convince and they want to defeat, right? And if you look at the internet, they want to destroy their opponent and help them understand that they are not right. And so they get caught up in persuading their opponent. But you're never going to persuade your opponent in competitive debate. It's not about the opponent, it's about the judge. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? In life, it's not about your opponent either. It's about all of those people that are watching you. And so, if you want to maintain your composure, turn your hands open. In fact, you should try it sometime. Have you ever been in a fight? Please, no one show their hands. You ever been in a fight, right, with your spouse or with a family member? And what happens? You get tense. Your fists are all clenched, right? Maybe you start pointing a finger like that. Try yelling and screaming at somebody with your hands open like this. It's really a lot harder to do. Some of you are like, well, I know somebody that can do it. Well, you try it, right? Keep your hands open and see how difficult it is to raise your voice and to maintain that level of anger and emotion. There's something about opening your hands that says, you know what, I'm open to listen to what you have to say, and I want that to be reciprocated. So if you want to be an effective leader, if you want to be an effective communicator, keep those hands open, keep your body language open, and understand that you are there to receive as well as to give. I talked about this in the first session. A way of doing this is by exhibiting humility. And so what are some characteristics of intellectual humility, right? Because sometimes we get the mistaken idea that as a leader, I've got to be right in every situation, in every circumstance, right. Whereas if you really want to lead, if you really want to be effective, you will ask more questions than anybody else that you're leading. Why? Because questions are the gateway to discovery. And so a characteristic of intellectual humility that goes a long way is that even when you feel strongly about something, are you still aware that you could be wrong? Is there the possibility that you don't know something and that you need to learn and that you need to grow? Do you trust that truth has nothing to fear from investigation? If you really believe that the truth is on your side, then you should be open to as many questions as possible. If you really feel like the truth is on your side, then you have nothing to fear from an investigation. Do you reserve the right to change your mind? Or do you feel weak or ashamed to change a strongly held opinion? Do you feel like that you need to hide past errors in your thinking? Do you approach others with the idea that you might have something to learn from them? These are all questions that you can ask yourself to help you discover your level of intellectual humility. And again, this is countercultural because in our culture, we tend to think of arrogance as strength, right? And never admitting that we're wrong, never admitting that we've made a mistake. When in all actuality, if you're interacting with someone who has an inability to admit that they've made a mistake, or the inability to admit that they're wrong, or the inability to welcome questions and investigation, it is likely that is not a characteristic of strength, but rather a characteristic of major weaknesses on their part. So if we want to be effective leaders, if we want to be real leaders, if we want to be courageous leaders, and not just pretend leaders, then we will exhibit humility and not arrogance. How do we do this? I mentioned this in the first lecture today when we talked about the idea that when the American West was being settled, people put up fences because they wanted to corral their cattle. Well, in other parts of the world, like Australia, this was cost prohibitive, right? The outback was too vast to put up fences in a realistic form. So what ranchers in Australia did to corral their cattle is that they dug a well. Imagine if you lived your life as a leader from a centered position rather than from a hard and fast boundary position, where you became a person that served as a life-giving source to those that are around you. That everyone wanted to be around you because of what you could give and not necessarily because of what you demanded. That is centered level leadership. None of us likes to be pigeonholed, right? None of us likes to have said to us, well, you've got to live in this coop. You've got to enter through this small little hole. Now, a lot of that can be comfortable, but guess what? It gets boring really, really quick. Why? Because not all pigeons were made for the coop. Some pigeons prefer the park. And so we need to be a leader that recognizes that not everybody is open to being pigeonholed. You can't put everybody in nice, neat little categories. You've got to get to know them, to understand them, and to earn the right to lead them by permission. And so do you want to be a bounded leader, right, that's holding everybody to these hard and fast boundaries? Here's the thing about boundaries. If you look at our nation today, everybody's fighting where there is a boundary. If you look at the border crisis, people are fighting about it. If you look at the divisions between ethnicities and races and color lines, everybody's fighting. There's lots of tension around those boundaries. Even around the boundaries of gender, even around the boundaries of class, there is tension, and that's where all of our fights ensue. So what if we were the type of leader that took a step back and said, you know what? There is a necessary function of boundaries, but in my personal interactions with those that are around me, I can't control what levels of bureaucracy are doing above me, but I can control how I'm interacting with those that are around me. And those that are around me are going to see me as a centered person, and they're going to want to come back. So the cattle in Australia, no matter how far they wander, they always come back, right? Because they need a drink of water. And so if you're that type of leader, people are going to give you permission to lead them and to guide them, not because they have to, but because they want to. And that's next level leadership, and that's where all of us want to be. So who are you helping? Right? All of us have a Peter Parker in our lives. All of us have a Spider-Man that we can be Iron Man to, right? That we can be someone that comes alongside them and serves as a guide. Are you making it easier or harder for those that are following you, those that are coming up beside you and behind you? You have influence. Everybody is an influencer. You're influencing somebody. Somebody is watching your life. Somebody is watching your example. And you don't want to be that person that's a bad example, right? Although you might have some bad examples in your life, you need to share those, but you don't want to be that person that says, when somebody looks back on your life, it's like, yeah, I don't want to go that direction. Rather, you want to be someone that is making it easier for those that are coming behind you to be successful in what they aspire to be and what they aspire to do. So just to reiterate something I covered in the last session, because repetition is the key to learning. In order to be a centered leader, to engage in centered communication in a bounded world, how do you do it? The first thing you do is you practice hospitality. Don't assume that others are hostile just because they are different. In fact, as a leader, you should seek out those that are different among those whom you lead. Why? Because they are probably the ones that have the most unique answers and the most unique perspectives to the problems that you're facing. As a leader, you need to cultivate a culture that says different is okay. Different is okay, because that is the hallmark of a true community and not just mere affinity, right? So you want to practice hospitality where you are welcoming to those that are around you, where you are welcoming to those who might deviate from you in some critical perspective. It's okay to be different. In fact, different is what will make us stronger in the long run. If I have a bunch of people that look like me, act like me, think like me, talk like me, one of us, if not all of us, are unnecessary because it's redundant. I want people that have different strengths and abilities than I have, and I want them around me. And most importantly, I want people that are more intelligent than I am, that have greater talents and greater abilities than I do. Why? Because that makes me stronger as a team and makes me better as a leader. Right? So cultivate differences. Practice hospitality to those that are different than you. Cultivate community instead of mere affinity. Right? You want that diverse group. You want that those people in your group that are different than you. If you think about those that provide the most contributions to our world, to our nation, think about the people that stand out in entertainment, that stand out in education, that stand out in sports. Typically, they aren't the cookie-cutter people that look like everybody else, but there's something unique about them, there's something different about them, there's something about how they project themselves to the rest of the world, and typically what is a big part of their strength is their deviance, right? I'm using that word in the positive connotation, in the way that they are different from the rest of the world. So find those people that are different, cultivate the relationship with them, and build that community. And finally, always make it a practice of saying, hello, my name is. Introduce yourself. Make sure they know your name. Make sure you know their name. And then ask them this question: how can I help you? How can I help you achieve your dreams? Tell me your story. Tell me the details about what's going on in your life. I want to get to know you better because I'm here to help you. I'm not the hero of this story. You are. I'm the person that's coming alongside you to guide you to the next level. I'm not Luke Skywalker. You are. I'm Yoda, right? I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm here to come along beside you to help you achieve that next promotion, to achieve that next status, to be the person that you were destined to be. Centered communication involves 4 elements, and I shared this in the last session. I'll go through it quickly again. This is worth the price of admission right here. This is what you need to take away. If you want to communicate effectively in any circumstance, in any situation, whether it's written, oral, one person, 5 people, 500 people, 5,000 people, this is what you do. You start a fire, build a bridge, give an example, and encourage action. Start a fire. You gain the audience's attention. I want you to listen to me. So what do? I exhibit passion for what I'm talking about. If you are bored with what you are communicating, you're not going to motivate the people that are listening to you to stay interested in what you're saying. So give me some joy, give me some enthusiasm, right? I am a preacher, so I got to quote at least one scripture. It's in my contract. The fact that the Bible says even make a joyful noise unto the Lord. It doesn't say, if you feel like it, get joyful. No, it says make a joyful noise. One of the first jobs that I ever had was I was in manufacturing. I worked for the Fruit of the Loom Corporation. I manufactured underwear. I was in underwear. Who knows? I may have had a hand in yours. Making the underwear, right? Yeah. Making the underwear. Just to be clear. I didn't like that job. It was third shift, right? I had to go in at 11 p.m. and get off at 7 a.m. It was monotonous. It was boring. But you know what? At the end of the week, they gave me this little thing called a paycheck. And when I got the paycheck, I was happy that I went in. So I wasn't joyful, but I made a joyful attitude when I was at the job because there was a payday coming. And guess what? You may not be passionate about everything you're doing right now, but there is a payday coming. So you need to get happy about it and manufacture that good attitude and that passion. If you want people enthusiastic that are following you, then you got to make some enthusiasm on the front end. Okay? So start a fire. Build a bridge. Smile every once in a while. Pretend like you're in a toothpaste commercial. Pick 3 or 4 people out in the audience and make eye contact with them, right? I'm not looking at the whole audience. I'm looking at the same 3 people. But all of you think that I'm looking at you. That's all you got to do. Make sure you're building that bridge, stepping across that chasm. Give an example. Tell us the story of how you got to where you were, right? Sometimes we assume people know how we did it. They don't know. We need to share that with them. Tell them the story. Give them the example of your struggles, of your situations, of your circumstances, the things that you are struggling with right now. It can serve as an inspiration and encouragement to those that are around you. Everybody has a story, and every good presentation, whether it's one-on-one or in front of a mass of people, should include at least one good example of what you're talking about. And finally, encourage action. Tell your audience what you want them to do, how you want them to feel, or what you want them to think. Every time you communicate with someone, they should walk away with something that they know to do, or they should walk away with a feeling, right? Maya Angelou said that people will forget what you say, but never how you make them feel. So how do you make them feel? So when they walk away from that communication context, how are they feeling? Are they motivated? Are they discouraged? Or have you made them think about something differently? Encourage people to action. Encourage them to think, feel, or act differently in every circumstance. And if you'll notice, as a good speaker, you're not only doing this once, but you're doing this over and over and over again. So throughout this presentation, I've been continually starting a fire, building a bridge, giving an example, and encouraging action. So I'm doing this at the meta level, but I'm also doing this at the micro level as well within the interaction. It's over and over and over again. That is centered communication. That is effective communication. And if you can do those 4 things, you're going to distinguish yourself as a competent leader and as an effective communicator to those that are around you. So wherever you find yourself on that spectrum in the generations, what I want you to take away from these sessions today is that you are an influencer, and what you can do in a world where people are building fences and where people are dividing themselves from each other over politics and over religion and over race and over all of the issues. And that's not to say that we don't have some very real and difficult issues in our world. But what I am suggesting is that the most effective way that we deal with these issues is not by putting up more fences and not reconstructing boundaries, but rather, instead of putting up another fence, why don't we dig a well? And why don't we become that person who serves as a life-giving leader in the lives of those that choose to follow us? Stay centered, my friends. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.